It was a typical Friday evening in the bustling city of Riverview. The hum of car engines, distant honks, and the lively chatter of pedestrians filled the air. The setting sun cast long shadows across the towering buildings, marking the end of another work week. Judge Lena Harper, a distinguished figure in Riverview's legal community, was finally heading home after a grueling day in court. Known for her sharp intellect and unwavering dedication to justice, Lena had earned respect for her firm yet compassionate approach to the law. As she drove her sleek black sedan through the calm suburban streets leading to her neighborhood, her thoughts drifted to her family. Her daughter, Callie, had just returned home after completing her first year at university. The weekend ahead was meant for reconnecting, a chance to share laughter, stories, and moments they had both missed during their months apart. The thought of seeing Callie's bright smile and hearing her tales of campus life filled Lena's heart with warmth. But that warmth was abruptly replaced by unease. Just as Lena approached a familiar intersection, the red and blue lights of a police cruiser flashed in her rearview mirror. Her heart quickened, and her thoughts snapped back to the present. Quickly, she went through her mental checklist. Seatbelt fastened, speed limit observed, a full stop made at the intersection. She was confident she had done nothing wrong. Yet the nervousness that often accompanied such interactions crept in. Lena, a black woman, was acutely aware of the biases and injustices that plagued society. Her position as a judge did not shield her from the realities that many faced. Taking a deep breath, she pulled her car over to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel tightly as she waited. Through her side mirror, she watched the officer approach. He was a young man, his gait confident and his expression marked by an unsettling arrogance. His hand rested casually on the handle of his holstered gun as he stopped beside her window, his gaze assessing her with a cold detachment. "Evening, officer," Lena said, her voice steady but firm. "Is there a problem?" The officer, whose name tag read R. Blake, didn't answer immediately. He scrutinized her for a moment longer before speaking. "License and registration," he demanded, his tone clipped and impersonal. Lena complied without hesitation, handing over her documents. She had nothing to hide. As Blake studied her license, his expression shifted slightly, his eyebrows raised when he read her title. "Judge Monroe," he said, his tone softening marginally as his eyes flicked from her license to the vehicle she was driving. A moment of hesitation followed before he added, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Lena met his gaze calmly. She could sense the subtle change in his demeanor, but refused to let her guard down. "No, officer, could you explain?" Blake smirked, as if enjoying the authority he held. "You were speeding and didn't make a full stop at the intersection back there," he said. Lena's brow furrowed slightly. She knew the claim wasn't true. She had been careful to obey all traffic rules, but she also knew from experience that challenging him directly would lead nowhere. She had seen too many cases like this, both on the bench and in her own life. "I see," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I must have been distracted." Her calm response seemed to unsettle Blake. Perhaps he had expected anger or resistance. Instead, his eyes darted around the interior of her car, as though searching for a reason to escalate the situation. After a brief pause, he stepped back and barked, "Step out of the vehicle." Lena's pulse quickened. "Is that necessary, officer?" she asked, her composure tinged with tension. "Step out of the vehicle. Now," he repeated, his tone more forceful. Reluctantly, Lena unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. She stood by the hood, watching as Blake began searching her car with methodical precision, opening compartments, looking under the seats, even checking the trunk. Her thoughts raced. Was this truly about a minor traffic violation, or was it something else? She couldn't shake the suspicion that her race and the sight of a black woman in a luxury car had played a role. A familiar knot of injustice twisted in her stomach. Minutes passed, and Blake found nothing. His expression remained unreadable as he walked back to her, handing over her license and registration. "You're free to go," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. Relief washed over Lena, but it was quickly overtaken by simmering anger. "Is that all, officer?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with indignation. Blake gave a terse nod before retreating to his cruiser. As Lena returned to her car, her hands trembled slightly. The encounter was over, but the sting of injustice lingered. She had done nothing wrong, yet she had been treated with suspicion and condescension. Driving home, one thought consumed her. This isn't over. As Lena climbed back into her car, her hands trembled slightly. The encounter was finished, but the sting of injustice lingered. This had not been a routine traffic stop. It was a stark reminder of the systemic biases she had spent her career combating. A battle she had long thought she was insulated from had now arrived at her doorstep. Driving home through the quiet streets of the Cedar Heights neighborhood, Lena's mind churned with a single, resolute thought. This isn't over. Later that evening, Lena sat in her living room, a warm cup of chamomile tea cradled in her hands. The soft glow of a reading lamp lit the room, but her thoughts were far from the comfort of home. She replayed the encounter over and over in her mind. The officer's dismissive tone, the baseless search, and the smug expression on his face. Although she had managed to stay calm and professional in the moment, the memory left her shaken. She knew Officer Blake's actions were more than just a personal affront. They were emblematic of a much deeper issue, one that impacted countless others who lacked her position, her voice, or her platform. Many were forced to endure these humiliations silently, powerless to push back. As she sat lost in thought, the sound of footsteps approached. Her daughter, Callie, entered the room, her bright eyes full of curiosity. "Mom, are you okay?" Callie asked, her voice gentle as she took in Lena's faraway expression. Lena looked up and gave her daughter a small, tired smile. Despite the weight of the night still hanging over her, Callie's presence was a welcome reprieve. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just thinking about what happened earlier," Lena replied, Callie's brow furrowed with concern. "I heard about it. That cop, what he did was wrong. You shouldn't have to go through that. No one should." Lena nodded, her grip tightening slightly on her teacup. "You're right," she said softly. "But this isn't just about me. It's about the countless people who face this kind of treatment every day, and worse, without anyone ever knowing. It's about a system that enables this to happen." Callie sat down next to her mother, her voice quiet but resolute. "So, what are you going to do?" Lena's gaze hardened with determination as she looked at her daughter. "I'm going to speak out. This can't keep happening." Callie's lips curved into a proud smile. She had always admired her mother's strength, but now she saw a spark that was even greater. A fire that had been lit and wouldn't be extinguished. The weekend in the Harper household was unusually quiet, but beneath the calm exterior, a storm brewed within Lena. The incident with Officer Blake wasn't something she could simply set aside. It stayed with her, not just as a personal insult, but as a vivid symbol of a much larger issue. For years, Lena had worked tirelessly to uphold justice, meticulously navigating the complexities of the law to ensure fairness prevailed. But now, the weight of systemic injustice had come crashing into her own life, and she knew she could no longer remain on the sidelines. As the golden light of dawn streamed through the kitchen window, Lena stood quietly at the counter, brewing her morning coffee. Upstairs, Callie was still asleep, but Lena's mind was already racing. The fire that had ignited the night before now burned fiercely within her. She had tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, the image of Officer Blake's dismissive gaze haunted her. She replayed the scene repeatedly, her thoughts spiraling into what-ifs. What if she hadn't been a judge? What if she had been someone who didn't know how to remain composed? What if she had reacted out of fear or frustration, and the situation had escalated? Lena had seen the consequences of such encounters countless times in her courtroom. Lives ruined over trivial incidents, encounters inflamed by prejudice and systemic neglect. Her thoughts sharpened into a singular purpose. Something had to change. As the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, Lena resolved to turn her anger into action. What had happened to her was not unique. It was part of a pattern that could no longer go unchallenged. And she knew she was in a position to do something about it. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the fight for a justice system that lived up to its name. That morning, she sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. Writing had always helped her organize her thoughts, and today, there was a lot to unravel. She began jotting down her ideas, starting with the formal complaint she intended to file against Officer Blake. But this wouldn't be just another routine complaint. No, This was going to be the start of something bigger, something that could spark meaningful change. A few hours later, her daughter Callie shuffled down the stairs, her hair tousled and her eyes still heavy with sleep. She paused when she saw her mother bent over her notebook, deeply focused. "Mom, you're up early," Callie said, as she slid into a chair across from her. Lena looked up, her expression resolute. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I've made a decision." Callie leaned forward, sensing the weight of the moment. "What kind of decision?" Lena took a deep breath, setting her pen down. "I'm not letting this go," she said firmly. "I've spent years fighting for justice in the courtroom, but last night was a stark reminder that the fight doesn't stop there. The system we're supposed to trust is broken, Callie, and someone needs to speak out." Callie's admiration for her mother grew with every word, but a flicker of concern crossed her face. "But how, Mom? I mean, we're talking about the police. They close ranks when one of their own is challenged. They're not going to make this easy for you." Lena met her daughter's worried gaze with the confidence that had carried her through countless battles in the courtroom. "I'm going to file a formal complaint, and I won't stop there. I'll use every resource available, the media, public opinion, legal avenues. People need to see what's really happening out there." Callie hesitated, her worry evident. "But won't that make you a target? What if they try to discredit you? You've worked so hard to build your reputation, and speaking out like this, it could put everything at risk." Lena leaned back in her chair, understanding her daughter's fears but unmoved in her resolve. "I know the risks," she said gently. "But if I stay silent, I'm no better than the system that allows this kind of behavior to continue unchecked. And this isn't just about me, Callie. It's about every black man and woman who's been stopped for no reason. It's about people who don't have a title or a platform to speak out." Callie bit her lip, nodding slowly as the gravity of her mother's words sank in. "I get it," she said quietly. "And I'm with you, Mom, whatever you need." A small smile touched Lena's lips, gratitude warming her voice. "Thank you. I'm going to need all the help I can get." Later that day, Lena met with her colleague and friend Paul Carter, a prominent civil rights attorney. They had worked together on several cases before, but this one felt different, personal. Paul had always respected Lena's tenacity and commitment to justice, and when he heard about the incident with Officer Blake, he didn't hesitate to lend his support. They sat in a small cafe near the Riverview courthouse, the sound of clinking cups and quiet chatter filling the air. "Paul, I need your help," Lena began, leaning across the table. "I want to file a formal complaint against Blake, but I don't want to stop there. This can't just be about me. It has to address the bigger issue of racial profiling and police misconduct." Paul nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious. "I agree. What Blake did was wrong, but it's just one thread in a much larger problem. Police culture, the lack of accountability, it's all connected. If we're going to take this on, we need to be ready for the pushback." "I know," Lena replied, her tone unwavering, "but I can't just let it go. Not this time." Paul leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "We can start with the formal complaint. I'll handle the legal aspects, but you need to be prepared for this to go public. Once the media picks it up, things could get messy." Lena nodded, fully aware of what lay ahead. She had seen public cases spiral out of control before, but this was different. If shining a light on the truth meant facing a storm, then so be it. "I'm ready," she said simply. They spent the next hour discussing strategy, mapping out the steps they would take. For Lena, this wasn't just about seeking justice for herself. It was about confronting a system that had allowed such behavior to thrive for far too long. And she wasn't going to back down. Once the draft was complete, Paul leaned back, his expression serious. "We'll submit this tomorrow. After that, it's in the hands of internal affairs. But don't expect a quick resolution. These things can drag on." Lena sighed, fully aware of the slow pace of bureaucratic justice. "I know," she replied, her voice steady, "but I'm not going anywhere." The following week was a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Lena returned to her duties at the Riverview courthouse. But the weight of the complaint against Officer Blake loomed over her. She couldn't ignore the subtle shifts in the way her colleagues and the officers in the building interacted with her. There was an unspoken tension in the air, as if her decision to file the complaint had made her a source of unease. Lena, however, refused to let their reactions intimidate her. She had faced challenges in her career before, and she wasn't about to back down now. Her daughter Callie, sensing the gravity of the situation, became an invaluable support. She listened to Lena's concerns late into the night, offering encouragement and reassurance. Callie had always been proud of her mother, but now she saw her as something more. A fighter for justice, not just within the courtroom but beyond it. One afternoon, as Lena sat in her office reviewing case files, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Paul. The subject line read, "Internal Affairs Hearing Date Set." Lena opened the email, her heart racing as she scanned the details. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, giving her the opportunity to present her case against Officer Blake and demand accountability for his actions. She sat back in her chair, a wave of emotions washing over her. Relief, apprehension, and determination intertwined as she realized the wheels of justice were finally in motion. Yet she knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Police departments were notoriously protective of their own, and this hearing would be no exception. As Lena closed the email, Callie appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Thought you might need this?" Callie said with a warm smile, handing a mug to her mother. Lena accepted the cup, her hands steady despite the growing pressure. "Thanks, sweetie. I'm going to need all the strength I can get." Callie sat down across from her, her eyes filled with admiration. "You've got this, Mom. You always do." Lena smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for her daughter's unwavering support. Taking a deep breath, she braced herself for the battle ahead. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about challenging a broken system and standing up for those who couldn't. It was about ensuring justice was served. The day of the hearing arrived in a blur of anticipation and unease. Lena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, carefully smoothing the lapels of her tailored jacket. Her reflection showed a woman of steely resolve. This was no ordinary day in court. Today she would face the very system she had dedicated her career to serving. But this time, she wasn't a judge presiding over a case. She was a plaintiff, seeking accountability for the misconduct she had endured. Downstairs, Callie paced nervously in the kitchen, unable to hide her fear. Her support for her mother had never wavered, but the stakes of the hearing felt overwhelming. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Callie asked when Lena came down the stairs. Her voice was filled with worry. "You know how these things go." Lena met her daughter's gaze with a calm yet resolute smile. "I know exactly how these things go, Callie. That's why I have to do this. But what if it doesn't change anything? What if they just brush it off?" Callie asked, her voice trembling slightly. "That's what people like Blake count on," Lena replied, her tone steady. "They rely on the system protecting them, assuming that most people won't push back. But I'm not most people." Callie nodded, her worry giving way to quiet admiration. "You're incredible, Mom." Lena pulled her daughter into a brief hug, drawing strength from the gesture. "Thank you, sweetheart. Let's go." As they walked out the door, Lena felt the fire within her burning brighter than ever. This wasn't just about her experience, it was about holding the system accountable and proving that justice could prevail, even against the odds. Callie nodded, her admiration for her mother shining through, though her worry lingered. She understood the strength Lena had to challenge authority, especially authority in uniform. But the risks gnawed at her. Retaliation, public smears, or a damaged career. These possibilities loomed large in Callie's mind. Still, she remained quiet, trusting that her mother knew exactly what she was doing. The ride to the Internal Affairs office was heavy with silence. Lena's thoughts raced, but her outward composure was unshakable. She had spent years in courtrooms, listening to cases where lives hung in the balance. Remaining calm under pressure was second nature to her, and today would be no different, even if this time it was personal. As the car pulled up to the imposing brick building, Lena spotted Paul Carter waiting outside. His sharp suit and confident stance gave the impression of someone ready for battle. Lena was grateful for his presence. "Morning, Judge," Paul greeted her with a small nod. Today the title felt less formal and more like a shield. Both knew she would need it. "Morning, Paul," Lena replied. straightening her back and slipping into her courtroom demeanor. "How's everything looking?" "We're ready," Paul said with calm certainty. "I've reviewed the evidence, and it's solid. The dashcam footage alone speaks volumes. But don't forget, this is internal affairs. Swift justice isn't exactly their strong suit." "I know," Lena said, her voice steely, "but we'll make them listen." They entered the building together, walking down a sterile hallway lined with framed photographs of decorated officers. The faces seemed to watch her, a silent reminder of the institution she was about to confront. Lena's footsteps echoed, each step bringing her closer to the moment she had been preparing for since the night of the traffic stop. Callie trailed a few steps behind, her emotions a mix of pride and anxiety. She had never seen her mother so focused, so resolute. At the end of the hallway, they were led into a conference room. A large wooden table dominated the space, and a panel of officers sat at the far end, their faces unreadable. Standing off to the side was Detective Frank Bennett, the lead investigator for internal affairs. He clutched a thick folder, its contents likely filled with the evidence Lena and Paul had meticulously provided. Across from the panel sat Officer Blake. Gone was the smug confidence he had displayed during the traffic stop. His demeanor was subdued, his eyes avoiding Lena's. Beside him sat his attorney, flipping through notes and preparing for what was sure to be a heated session. Lena and Paul took their seats at the opposite end of the table. As Lena glanced around the room, the weight of history pressed down on her. This was the same system that had shielded officers like Blake for years. She knew the statistics, how rarely officers faced real consequences for misconduct. But today, she wasn't just another statistic. Today, she was there to disrupt the status quo. Detective Bennett cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "We're here today to review the formal complaint filed by Judge Lena Harper against Officer Daniel Blake for misconduct during a traffic stop on the night of May 12th. We'll be reviewing evidence, including dashcam footage, and hearing testimony from both parties. Let's begin." The room tensed as the lights dimmed. All eyes turned to the large screen mounted on the wall. The dashcam footage began to play, and Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. The video showed her car driving down a quiet street. Then came the sudden flash of red and blue lights as Officer Blake initiated the stop. The footage captured the entire encounter, his abrupt tone, the baseless accusations, the unwarranted demand for her to exit the vehicle, and his intrusive search of her car. The room was silent, save for the audio of the encounter. Lena's calm responses contrasted starkly with Blake's escalating aggression. Watching it unfold again, Lena felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Reliving the moment was painful, but it also reignited her determination. The video ended, and the lights came back on. A charged silence filled the room. Detective Bennett addressed the panel, his tone neutral. "The footage provides a clear account of the incident. We will now proceed with statements from both parties." As Lena prepared to speak, she stole a glance at Callie, who sat quietly behind her. Her daughter's presence was a steadying force, a reminder of why Lena was there. This wasn't just for her, it was for Callie and for everyone who had been silenced. Squaring her shoulders, Lena met the gaze of the panel. "Let's begin," she said, her voice unwavering. Lena Harper hadn't realized how deeply unsettling the traffic stop had been until she saw it replayed through the cold, unflinching lens of the dashcam. The footage revealed everything: her calm, composed demeanor, Officer Blake's escalating hostility, and his grudging admission that she was free to go. When the video ended, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Detective Frank Bennett broke it, addressing Lena directly. "Judge Harper, would you like to make a statement?" Lena stood, her heart racing even as her face remained composed. She had spoken in courtrooms countless times, but this moment felt entirely different. She wasn't just presenting a case, she was defending her dignity, her right to exist within a system that often failed people like her. "Yes, I would," she said, her voice steady. She paused, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "What you just saw on that footage is not an isolated incident. This happens every day to countless black men and women, most of whom don't have the title or platform that I do. Officer Blake's actions were not just an abuse of power, they reflect a much larger problem embedded in the system." Her gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of the panel as she continued. I wasn't pulled over because I broke the law. I was pulled over because I fit a profile. To Officer Blake, a black woman driving a nice car at night was suspicious. That is the reality I face, the reality so many of us face, every single day. She let her words hang in the air for a moment before concluding. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for justice. I'm asking for accountability. Those who enforce the law must be held to the highest standard, and Officer Blake failed to meet that standard. As Lena sat back down, her heart was still pounding. She could feel the weight of the room's attention on her, but she refused to waver. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let fear steal it from her. Next, Officer Blake's attorney stood, launching into the defense Lena had anticipated. He argued that Blake had acted within the bounds of his authority, that the traffic stop was lawful, and that there was no concrete evidence of racial profiling. He portrayed Blake as a dedicated officer, simply doing his job under challenging circumstances. But the footage told a different story, and Lena knew that no matter how the defense tried to spin it, the truth was plain to see. For hours, the hearing continued, with both sides presenting their cases. Paul Carter, ever the skilled litigator, expertly cross-examined Blake. He methodically pointed out inconsistencies in Blake's testimony, highlighting how the officer's actions had unnecessarily escalated a routine traffic stop. By the time the hearing adjourned, Lena felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence was strong, and they had made their case convincingly. But she knew better than to assume victory just yet. As they exited the building, Callie rushed to her mother's side, her face glowing with hope. "Mom, you were incredible in there. I think you really got through to them," Callie said, pride evident in her voice. Lena smiled, though the weight of the day still pressed heavily on her. "I hope so, sweetie, but we'll have to wait and see." Paul joined them, his demeanor calm but reassuring. "You did everything right, Lena. Now, it's up to them." The drive home was quiet, the tension of the hearing still hanging in the air. Lena stared out the car window, her mind racing. She had fought with every ounce of strength she had, but now the decision rested with the very system she had spent her career upholding. For now, all she could do was wait. As they pulled into the driveway, Callie reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you," she said softly. Lena returned the gesture, feeling the warmth of her daughter's support. "Thank you, Callie. No matter what, we're not done. Not by a long shot." The days following the hearing were marked by an eerie sense of anticipation. Each hour felt like a ticking clock, counting down to an outcome that could shape not only Lena's future but also the futures of so many others. The complaint against Officer Blake had already begun to stir whispers in the legal circles of Riverview. The stakes were high, and the potential ripple effects of the decision loomed large. Lena carried on with her daily routine, but the tension never left her. Every glance, every passing comment felt loaded with unspoken judgment. Her colleagues seemed unsure how to approach her now, torn between admiration and unease. Through it all, Callie remained by her side, a steadfast source of strength. Though she worried for her mother, her pride was stronger. Lena wasn't just her mother anymore. She was a symbol of resilience, courage, and the fight for justice. Lena knew the road ahead would be long, and the waiting unbearable. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. The battle for justice had only just begun. Officer Blake's name was already creating ripples within Riverview's legal community, but now the media had taken notice. What began as an internal affairs case had turned into a public issue, and Judge Lena Harper was becoming the face of a much larger battle. One evening, as Lena sat in her study reviewing case files for the upcoming week, her phone buzzed with a notification from a news outlet she followed. Expecting legal updates or local crime reports, she glanced at the screen, only to be met with a headline that made her heart skip a beat. "Respected judge files formal complaint against officer for racial profiling, community divided." Lena clicked the article, her pulse quickening. She hadn't expected media coverage to arrive so soon, but in the digital age, stories like this spread like wildfire. The article detailed the hearing, included excerpts from the dashcam footage, and offered a profile of her career. The tone of the piece was neutral, but Lena knew how quickly narratives could spiral out of control. What troubled her most, though, were the comments beneath the article. Anonymous voices spewed hostility. "She's just playing the race card. Here we go again, another overreaction. She's a judge. She should know better than to make a fuss over a simple traffic stop." Lena let out a frustrated sigh, closing the article. She had braced herself for backlash, but seeing it in print still stung. These commenters didn't know her, didn't understand the gravity of what had happened or the broader implications of systemic misconduct. For them, it was just another headline to critique. But for Lena, it was about more than her. It was about all the black men and women who faced far worse, those without her resources, her platform, or any recourse at all. As she reached for the power button on her computer, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Paul Carter. She picked up immediately, grateful for someone who understood the weight of what she was facing. "Hey, Lena," Paul began, his voice calm but measured. "I'm guessing you saw the article." "I did," Lena replied, leaning back in her chair. "It was only a matter of time before the media got involved," Paul said with a hint of resignation. "Yeah, and the comments," Lena trailed off, rubbing her temples. "They're brutal. I expected pushback, but it still gets to me. They're acting like I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, like this was just some minor inconvenience." "It's easier for people to think that way," Paul said. "Acknowledging the truth means confronting the system they trust. Most people don't want to do that. They want to believe the police are always in the right." Lena nodded, even though Paul couldn't see her. She knew he was right, but it didn't make the weight of it any easier to bear. "I just hope we can make them see the bigger picture." "We will," Paul reassured her. "But there's something else you need to know. I've been getting calls. A few reporters want to interview you. They're asking for your side of the story." Lena's pulse quickened. Though she was a public figure in the courtroom, she had always valued her privacy. The thought of sharing her personal experience with the media was daunting. Still, she understood this fight was bigger than her discomfort. "If I don't tell my story," Lena said after a long pause, "someone else will. And they might not get it right." "Exactly," Paul agreed. "We'll take it slow. I'll help you prepare so you're ready. We can use this to turn the tide in our favor." The next morning, Lena sat at the kitchen table with Callie. Though the coffee was freshly brewed, the tension from the previous night still lingered. Callie, phone in hand, scrolled through the flood of comments and social media posts about the article, her brow furrowed with frustration. "Mom, I know you're strong, but this is getting intense," she said, her voice tinged with worry. Lena reached out to touch her daughter's hand. "I know, sweetie, it's a lot, and people can be cruel when they're hiding behind a screen. But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure this doesn't keep happening to others." Callie looked up from her phone, her eyes filled with concern. "I just don't want them to tear you apart, Mom. You don't deserve this." "No one does," Lena said gently. "And that's why I can't back down now." Though Callie nodded, her worry was evident. She had always admired her mother's strength, but seeing her face this level of scrutiny and judgment felt overwhelming. "Let them come," Lena said, her tone resolute. "I'm not gonna let them twist this into something it's not. This is bigger than me, and it's time people started paying attention." Callie's admiration for her mother grew, even as her worry deepened. "Just promise me one thing," she said. "Anything," Lena replied. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself too." Lena smiled, her resolve unshaken. "I will, Callie. I promise." The storm was gathering, but Lena was ready to face it. This wasn't just about fighting back against one officer's misconduct. It was about standing up to a system that had gone unchecked for far too long. Just as they finished breakfast, Lena's phone buzzed. She checked it to find an email from one of the news outlets that had reached out to her. They wanted to run an in-depth feature, focusing not just on the traffic stop, but also on her career and her broader fight for justice. It was the perfect opportunity to reclaim the narrative, to tell her story before it could spiral out of control. But Lena knew the risks. Every word she said would be dissected and scrutinized. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the message she was sending to her community. After a moment's pause, she replied to the email, "Let's do it." 2 days later, Lena found herself sitting in a sleek downtown studio. The bright lights and cameras focused squarely on her. Across from her was Naomi Reed, a journalist with a reputation for fairness and thoughtful reporting. Lena had chosen her carefully, knowing that Naomi would approach the story with care and integrity. The interview began with pleasantries. Naomi asked about Lena's background, her journey to becoming a judge, and her dedication to justice. Lena answered confidently, her responses measured and professional. Then the conversation shifted. Naomi's tone grew more serious. "Judge Harper, you filed a formal complaint against Officer Daniel Blake, accusing him of racial profiling and misconduct during a routine traffic stop. Could you walk us through what happened that night and why you felt compelled to take this step?" Lena took a deep breath, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had rehearsed this moment with Paul, but now that it was here, the weight of it felt heavier than she had expected. "It was a routine traffic stop," Lena began, her voice steady. "But the way Officer Blake handled it was anything but routine. From the moment he approached my car, his behavior was aggressive and dismissive. He accused me of speeding and running a stop sign, neither of which I had done. When I explained that I hadn't broken any laws, he demanded that I step out of the vehicle and then proceeded to search my car without cause." Naomi nodded, her expression intent. "And do you believe this treatment was because of your race?" Lena didn't hesitate. Her gaze was firm. "Absolutely. I've been a judge for over a decade and I know the law. I know my rights. But that night, I wasn't treated like a respected legal professional. I wasn't treated like someone who had committed a minor traffic violation. I was treated like a suspect, simply because I was a black woman driving a nice car at night. And that's not just a personal grievance, it's a systemic issue." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her pen poised. "What do you hope to achieve with this complaint? What changes are you looking for?" "I want accountability," Lena said without hesitation. "Not just for Officer Blake, but for the entire system that allows this behavior to go unchecked. Police officers are entrusted with incredible power, and with that power comes responsibility. They need to be held to the highest standard. If we allow this kind of misconduct to continue without consequences, we're complicit in perpetuating injustice." As the interview continued, Lena laid out her case with clarity and resolve. She spoke not just of her own experience, but of the countless others who faced similar treatment without the resources or platform to fight back. When the cameras stopped rolling, Lena felt a mix of relief and anticipation. She had said what needed to be said, but she knew the public's response could go either way. That night, Callie sat beside her on the couch as they waited for the interview to air. "You did amazing, Mom," she said, her voice full of pride. Lena smiled, pulling her daughter close. "Thank you, sweetheart, but this is just one step. We still have a long way to go." The broadcast went live, and Lena's story began to reach a wider audience. As the public discussion grew louder, Lena braced herself for what was to come. The battle wasn't over, but she was more determined than ever to see it through. The following morning, the interview aired, and the response was immediate. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, many of them supportive. People rallied behind Lena's call for accountability and systemic reform. The tides were beginning to turn, and the narrative was shifting in her favor. But the support also brought inevitable backlash. Some accused Lena of seeking attention, of manufacturing controversy where there was none. Others dismissed her as overreacting to a routine traffic stop. Lena had prepared herself for this, but knowing it would happen didn't make it easier to face. Now, with the public watching closely and the internal affairs decision still pending, the stakes felt higher than ever. This was no longer a personal battle, it was a fight for the soul of a broken system. The days following the interview were a whirlwind. Feedback poured in from all corners, with some praising Lena for her bravery and others attacking her motives. The media coverage continued to grow, and Lena found herself at the center of a broader conversation about race, policing, and justice in America. Every headline with her name felt like another spotlight, one she had never sought but could no longer avoid. Callie watched the chaos unfold with a mix of pride and fear. She had always known her mother to be strong, but now she saw that strength being tested in ways she hadn't imagined. While she admired Lena for standing up, Callie couldn't shake the unease settling in her chest. It was a quiet Friday afternoon when Callie finally voiced her concerns. They were sitting in the living room, the soft murmur of the news playing in the background. Lena's story was everywhere, and it seemed like every channel had a different angle. "Mom," Callie began hesitantly, tracing the edge of a throw pillow with her fingers. "I'm worried." Lena looked over at her daughter, sensing the weight behind her words. "I know you're doing the right thing," Callie continued, her voice steady but laced with concern. "But this is getting so big. People are talking about you like you're some kind of symbol. What if this gets out of control?" Lena reached out, placing a hand on Callie's knee. "I understand," she said softly. She had noticed the strain in her daughter's voice over the past few days. The way Callie's smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. This fight wasn't just affecting Lena, it was affecting everyone around her, especially her daughter. "This is bigger than I ever expected," Lena admitted. "And I'm not going to pretend that I'm not scared sometimes. But I also know that if we don't speak up, nothing will ever change. What happened to me wasn't just about a traffic stop. It was about a system that's been allowed to operate without accountability for far too long." Callie sighed, leaning back into the couch. "But what about you, Mom? I'm scared for you. I've seen the threats online, the comments. People are angry, and some of them, they're dangerous. What if someone tries to hurt you?" Lena's face softened as she saw the fear in her daughter's eyes. She took Callie's hand and held it tightly. "I won't lie to you, Callie. There are risks. But if we let fear silence us, then the people who want to maintain the status quo win. I have to do this, for me, for you, and for everyone who's been silenced." Callie's eyes filled with unshed tears. "I just don't want to lose you to this fight." "You won't," Lena said firmly. "I promise you that. But I can't stop now. This fight, it's bigger than us, and we're not alone." Callie nodded, though the worry didn't entirely leave her expression. She admired her mother more than ever, but the weight of the battle ahead loomed large. Lena pulled her daughter into a hug, holding her tightly. "We're going to get through this," she whispered, "together." The storm around them was intensifying, but Lena Harper was resolute. This was no longer just her fight. It was a fight for justice, for accountability, and for a better future. The following week, the media frenzy surrounding Lena's case reached a fever pitch. Paul had warned her this might happen, but the sheer magnitude of the attention caught her off guard. News outlets now referred to it as the Harper case, and pundits debated it nightly on television. Everyone had an opinion. Many rallied behind Lena, seeing her as a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of resilience and strength in the face of systemic injustice. Community leaders and activists reached out, eager to align their efforts with hers. But the backlash was equally fierce, if not louder. Police unions condemned her, accusing her of vilifying law enforcement and eroding public trust. Social media became a battleground filled with insults, accusations, and veiled threats. Lena's inbox was flooded. Some emails were messages of support, but many were filled with hate. Anonymous senders spewed slurs and issued threats, while strangers mailed letters demanding she stop causing trouble and know her place. At first, Lena tried to block out the negativity, but as the days wore on, the ugliness began to weigh on her. Still, she refused to be silenced. One evening, as Lena sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number she didn't recognize, but something compelled her to answer. Judge Harper, the warm, steady voice on the other end, began. "This is Reverend Anita Hayes. I'm the pastor at First Unity Church. I've been following your case closely, and I just want to say how proud I am of what you're doing." Lena's breath caught. The Reverend was a prominent civil rights leader, well respected throughout the community. "You're not just standing up for yourself," Reverend Hayes continued, her voice full of conviction. "You're standing up for all of us. We've been waiting for someone to take this fight head on, and I want you to know that we've got your back." Lena was deeply moved. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of community, of solidarity. She wasn't alone in this fight after all. "Thank you, Reverend," Lena said, her voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know. Some days, it feels like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, but hearing from people like you, it makes me feel like I can keep going." "You can," And you will, Reverend Hayes replied warmly. We're organizing a rally next week to show our support for you and the fight against police brutality and racial profiling. I'd like you to speak at the rally, if you're willing. Lena hesitated. The idea of addressing a crowd of hundreds, possibly thousands, was daunting. She had always been comfortable in the courtroom, where rules were clear and the environment controlled. A rally was an entirely different kind of stage. I'm honored, Reverend, Lena said after a moment. But are you sure I'm the right person for this? I'm just one woman. I don't know if I'm ready to be the face of this movement. You don't have to be the face, Judge Harper, Reverend Hayes said gently. But your voice carries weight. People listen to you, and right now we need your voice more than ever. Lena's mind raced. She thought about the people who had reached out to her, sharing their own stories of injustice. She thought about Callie and the world she wanted her daughter to inherit. All right, Lena said, her voice steady. I'll do it. Reverend Hayes's tone brightened. That's wonderful to hear. Together, we'll make sure this message is heard loud and clear. As Lena hung up the phone, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The rally would be a new challenge, but she was ready to face it. This fight wasn't just hers, it belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced. The day of the rally arrived, bringing with it a sense of anticipation that hung heavy in the air. Hundreds of people gathered at Unity Park, their signs held high, their voices unified in a call for justice. Lena stood behind the stage, watching the growing crowd from a distance. Callie was by her side, holding her hand tightly for reassurance. On her other side was Paul Carter, quiet but steady, his presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. You ready for this? Paul asked, his tone light but serious. Lena took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The sound of the crowd chanting for justice filled her ears as she stepped onto the stage. The sea of faces turned toward her, expectant and hopeful. A wave of nervousness threatened to wash over her, but Lena steadied herself with the thought of why she was here. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who didn't have a platform, who couldn't speak out, who had been silenced for too long. She approached the microphone, her voice clear and strong as it cut through the air. Thank you, Reverend Hayes, and thank you to everyone here today. I stand before you not just as a judge, not just as a black woman who has experienced injustice, but as someone who believes we all deserve better. The crowd erupted in applause, but Lena raised a hand, signaling for quiet. What happened to me wasn't unique, she continued. It wasn't an isolated incident. This happens every day in cities and towns across this country. It happens to people without titles, without platforms, without a way to fight back. But today we are here to say, enough is enough. We will not be silent. We will not be ignored. Her voice grew stronger, fueled by the energy of the crowd. This isn't just about one bad officer or one broken system. This is about a society that has allowed injustice to thrive in plain sight. But we are here because we believe that change is possible. We are here because we refuse to accept the status quo. And together, we will make a difference. The crowd roared in response, their cheers echoing through the park. A surge of emotion rose within Lena as she looked out at the faces of people who believed in her, who believed in the fight for justice. It was more than she had ever imagined, but it felt like exactly where she needed to be. As the rally continued, Lena stepped back from the microphone, her heart racing with a mixture of exhilaration and relief. Callie rushed to her side, her eyes shining with pride. "You were amazing, Mom," she said, wrapping her arms around Lena. Lena smiled, holding her daughter close. "Thank you, sweetheart. I couldn't have done it without you." Paul joined them, clapping Lena on the back. "You did it, Lena. You turned this into something bigger than just a complaint. You turned it into a movement." Lena nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. The battle for justice wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't fighting it alone. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the crowd, Lena realized something profound. The power of her voice was greater than she had ever known. And she was ready to keep using it, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The days following the rally marked a noticeable shift. Something had changed, not just in how the public perceived Lena, but in how she saw herself. She had gone from being a quiet warrior within the confines of her courtroom to becoming a symbol of resilience, courage, and change. The rally had been a defining moment, a declaration that she would not be silenced. It had sent a powerful message, not just to the system she was challenging, but to the community she was fighting for. Though Lena knew the road ahead would still be difficult, she felt more certain than ever that she was on the right path. The rally was just the beginning, and she was ready for the fight to come. Lena knew this was the cost of standing up, and while the threats weighed heavily on her, they didn't shake her. If anything, they solidified her resolve. She couldn't back down, not when so many were watching, waiting to see if she would falter or cave under pressure. One afternoon, as Lena was preparing for another day in court, her phone rang. It was Paul Carter, and the urgency in his voice immediately put her on edge. "Lena," he said, "I just got word from Internal Affairs. They're about to release their decision on Officer Blake." Lena's heart skipped a beat. The moment she had been fighting for was finally here. "What are they saying?" she asked, her voice steady but tight with anticipation. "They want to meet with you privately first," Paul replied. "The official announcement will come after. It's unusual, but they're giving us a heads up." Lena clenched her jaw. This wasn't standard procedure, and she didn't like the sound of it. "Do they think this will all just go away if they talk to me behind closed doors?" "I don't know," Paul admitted, "but we need to be ready for anything. This could go either way." "Okay," Lena said with a determined nod, even though Paul couldn't see her. "When's the meeting?" "They want to meet today, in 2 hours." The drive to the Internal Affairs office felt different this time. The tension that had followed Lena for the past few months was heavier now, almost suffocating. She sat in the passenger seat as Paul drove in silence. The worry etched on his face mirrored her own, but neither of them spoke. The weight of what was about to happen said more than words ever could. When they arrived at the building, Lena took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She had prepared for every possible outcome, but now that the moment was here, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Still, she walked into the office with her head held high, her shoulders squared. Whatever awaited her, she would face it with strength. They were led into a dimly lit conference room, where 2 high-ranking members of Internal Affairs were waiting. Detective Frank Bennett, who had led the investigation, sat on one side of the table. Beside him was Captain Rachel Moore, one of the highest-ranking officers in the department. "Judge Harper, Mr. Carter, thank you for coming," Captain Moore said, her tone formal but guarded. "We've concluded our investigation into the complaint you filed against Officer Daniel Blake." Lena's heart pounded as she and Paul took their seats. Paul's steady presence beside her was grounding, but she could feel the tension radiating through the room. Detective Bennett cleared his throat before speaking. After reviewing the dashcam footage, conducting interviews, and evaluating all evidence, Internal Affairs has determined that Officer Blake's actions were inappropriate and in violation of departmental policy. A wave of relief washed over Lena. Finally, there was acknowledgement of Blake's misconduct, but she held her breath, knowing there was more to come. However, Bennett continued, his eyes flicking briefly toward Captain Moore, "We have also determined that his actions do not rise to the level of criminal misconduct. Officer Blake will face internal disciplinary measures, including a suspension without pay and mandatory retraining." The relief Lena had felt a moment ago was quickly replaced by frustration. Suspension? After everything, after months of public scrutiny, threats, and the emotional toll this fight had taken, this was the consequence? A few weeks without pay and some retraining? Lena's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. "A suspension?" she asked, her voice cool but sharp. Captain Moore leaned forward, her tone measured. "We believe this is a fair resolution given the circumstances. Officer Blake's actions will be documented, and he will be closely monitored going forward." Lena's frustration boiled beneath the surface, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Paul spoke up, his voice firm. "With all due respect, this isn't about one officer. This is about a system that allows this kind of behavior to persist. A slap on the wrist won't fix that." Captain Moore's face hardened slightly. "We understand the broader concerns, but our investigation was focused on this specific incident. We encourage you to continue working with us to improve policies and address systemic issues." Lena nodded once, her resolve firm. "Thank you for your time," she said, standing. As Lena and Paul left the building, the weight of the decision settled over her like a heavy cloak. They had won a small victory, just enough to acknowledge that Officer Blake's actions were wrong, but it wasn't enough. The system had once again protected its own, offering a minor concession to avoid public outrage without making any real effort to dismantle the structures that allowed such behavior to persist. "Suspension," Lena muttered under her breath as they approached the car. "That's all they're giving him." Paul sighed, leaning against the hood. "It's not surprising, Lena. They were never going to fully throw him under the bus. But you force them to acknowledge that something's wrong." "That's a start." Lena crossed her arms, her face set in a hard line. "It's not enough, not even close." "No," Paul agreed, "but this isn't the end. You've got people listening now, paying attention. You've turned this into something bigger than just a traffic stop. And that's power." Lena exhaled slowly, knowing he was right. She had always understood that real change wouldn't come quickly, but the hope she had felt after the rally was dimmed by the reality of how deeply entrenched the system was. When Lena returned home that evening, Callie was waiting for her in the living room. Her face was full of nervous anticipation. "How did it go?" Callie asked. Lena shook her head. "Suspension, retraining, that's it." Callie's expression fell. "That's all? After everything?" "That's all," Lena said quietly. She sank into the couch, the exhaustion of the past few months finally catching up with her. Callie sat beside her, silent for a moment, before speaking again. "So what happens now? Are you going to stop?" Lena turned to her daughter, her determination flickering back to life. "No," she said firmly. "This isn't over. Not even close. If I stop now, then nothing changes. And I didn't come this far just to accept a half measure." Callie nodded, a small smile breaking through her worried expression. "I knew you'd say that. You're incredible, Mom." Lena reached over, pulling her daughter into a hug. "Thank you, sweetheart. I just wish it didn't have to be this hard." "You're making a difference," Callie said quietly. "Even if it doesn't feel like it right now." Lena held her daughter tightly, letting the warmth of her support fortify her. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she wasn't walking it alone. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were filled with a new kind of energy. Lena had become more than just a judge fighting her own battle. She had become a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of resilience for those silenced by fear and frustration. The movement that had begun with her complaint against Officer Blake was growing rapidly. While his punishment had been a disappointment, Lena knew the fight for justice was far from over. She began working closely with civil rights organizations, advocating for reforms in the Riverview Police Department. She used her platform to speak at rallies, write op-eds in major newspapers, and demand real accountability and transparency in law enforcement. Lena wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been failed by a system designed to protect itself. The threats didn't stop, but neither did the support. People from all walks of life reached out to Lena, sharing their own stories of injustice and encounters with systemic racism. The outpouring of shared experiences was overwhelming, but it also gave her a renewed sense of purpose. Lena Harper wasn't just a judge anymore. She was an advocate, a fighter, and a leader. The fire within her burned brighter than ever, fueled by the voices of those who had been silenced for too long. She knew the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but she was ready for the journey. One evening, Lena sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and notes for an upcoming meeting with city officials. The weight of the fight pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she was undeterred. Callie walked into the room holding a cup of tea. "I thought you might need this," she said, placing the cup on the desk with a smile. Lena looked up at her daughter, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thanks, sweetie. I do." Callie sat down across from her, watching her mother work with quiet admiration. "You're going to change things, Mom. I know you are." Lena smiled softly, her heart full of hope despite the challenges she faced. "I hope so, Callie. I really hope so." As she sipped her tea, Lena let herself reflect on how far she had come. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But Lena knew, deep in her soul, that she was ready. This wasn't just a fight for justice, it was a fight for the future. And no matter how long it took, Lena Harper was prepared to see it through.